There were only two names left, Ryan's and someone else's. One of them would become financially free before turning 40. The other would spend the next 30 years working for the first one. Neither of them knew it yet, because the decision that separated their futures looked so small that nobody in the room even noticed it. 3 years earlier, Ryan believed life was simple. Study hard, get a good job, save money, work your way up, repeat. It sounded logical, until life started asking questions that nobody had prepared him for. Why did the hardest working people he knew always seem exhausted? Why did people earning twice his salary still complain about money? Why did some people quietly disappear from the race, while everyone else kept running faster? Ryan couldn't answer any of them, so he did what most people do. He blamed himself. Maybe I'm just behind. Then something happened that changed the direction of his life forever. Not a lottery ticket, not a stock market crash, not a promotion, a conversation that lasted exactly 94 seconds. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Ryan was waiting in line to buy coffee. The man in front of him looked completely forgettable. Gray hoodie, old sneakers, cheap watch, nothing expensive. When it was his turn to pay, his card was declined. Ryan instinctively stepped forward. "I've got it." The man smiled. "No thanks." He pulled out another card, paid, picked up his coffee, then looked directly at Ryan and asked, "Can I ask you something?" Ryan nodded. The man pointed toward the busy street outside. Hundreds of people hurried past. Cars, buses, phones, deadlines. Then he asked one sentence. A sentence Ryan would spend years trying to fully understand. "How many of those people do you think are actually getting richer?" Ryan shrugged. "Most of them, probably." The man smiled, shook his head, then quietly replied, "That's exactly what I used to think." He walked away. No explanation, no advice, nothing. Just one question left hanging in Ryan's mind. That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. Not because of the stranger, because of his own answer. He realized he had never actually checked whether people around him were becoming wealthier. He had only assumed they were, based on cars, vacations, houses, photos, promotions, appearances. For the first time, Ryan asked himself something uncomfortable. What if I've spent my entire life comparing myself to a story that isn't even real? That question became an obsession. Over the next 6 months, Ryan stopped studying money. Instead, he started studying people. Not billionaires, not influencers, not celebrities, ordinary teachers, electricians, nurses, small business owners, retirees, people nobody interviews, people nobody follows. And then, he found something that made no sense. The people who looked rich rarely became free. The people who became free rarely looked rich. Ryan checked the numbers again. Same result. Again. Same result. Felt impossible. Until one tiny detail connected every single story. The detail was so ordinary that Ryan almost ignored it. If he had, his future would have looked completely different. Because from that moment on, Ryan stopped asking, "How do I become rich?" He started asking a question so different that almost nobody ever thinks to ask it. And that single question quietly split his life into a before and an after. Ryan thought he had found an interesting coincidence, so he tried to destroy it. Because if the pattern was real, it should survive being questioned. For the next 30 days, he searched for people who proved him wrong. High earners who were truly free, low earners who weren't, people who looked wealthy and actually were, and people who looked ordinary but secretly weren't. He expected the pattern to fall apart. Instead, it became stronger. Then Ryan noticed something so strange that he stopped looking at income completely. Because income wasn't predicting freedom. Choices were. Every financially free person he studied had started buying the exact same thing years before they looked successful. Not houses, not stocks, not businesses. They were buying options. the option to quit, the option to wait, the option to say no, the option to survive bad luck without panic. Ryan stared at those notes for hours. Nobody had ever described money that way. Every finance book he'd read talked about returns. Nobody talked about options. Then a memory came back. The stranger in the coffee shop. How many of those people are actually getting richer? Ryan finally understood he had answered the wrong question. The real question wasn't, who's earning more? It was, who's becoming harder to control? That sentence hit him harder than anything he'd read, because he suddenly saw it everywhere. The coworker who couldn't leave a toxic job. The friend trapped by 3 car payments. The neighbor who earned 6 figures, yet panicked every time layoffs were mentioned. They weren't poor, but they weren't free either. And maybe those weren't the same thing. Ryan became obsessed again. He filled an entire wall with sticky notes. One side was labeled, people who looked rich. The other, people who owned their time. At first, he expected both lists to contain the same names. They almost never did. One evening, he looked at the wall and realized something that genuinely scared him. His own goals had been copied from the wrong list. Everything he'd wanted, the apartment, the title, the expensive watch, had been borrowed. Not chosen. Borrowed. From advertisements. From social media. From people he'd never met. For the first time in his life, Ryan couldn't answer a simple question. If nobody could see my life, what would I actually want? Silence. Because he had no idea. And that's when he understood the real trap. The race wasn't designed to make people wealthy. It was designed to keep them comparing. The more they compared, the faster they ran. The faster they ran, the less time they had to question where they were running. Ryan walked back to the wall, slowly removed every sticky note except one. The stranger's question. How many of those people are actually getting richer? He looked at it for a long time, then quietly wrote something underneath. Not another answer. A new question. One that would completely change everything that came next. What does rich actually mean? And that question would lead Ryan to a discovery that almost cost him the future he thought he wanted. Ryan couldn't answer the question. What does rich actually mean? So instead of reading another book, he did something far more dangerous. He started changing his own life. Not dramatically, quietly, one decision at a time. 3 weeks later, his manager called him into the office. I've got good news. Promotion. A bigger office. A 22% raise. Exactly the opportunity Ryan had dreamed about for years. 6 months earlier, he would have accepted before hearing the details. This time, he asked one question. What changes? His manager smiled. More responsibility. Longer hours. More travel. You'll probably be available on weekends. Everyone in the room expected Ryan to say yes. Instead, he asked for 24 hours. That night, he walked through the city. The same streets. The same buildings. The same people. But for the first time, he wasn't looking at what they owned. He was looking at what they couldn't leave. The man answering work emails during dinner. The woman canceling plans because of another meeting. The businessman sitting in first class, still glued to his laptop. Ryan suddenly realized something terrifying. Success had become a prettier version of survival. The next morning, he walked back into the office. His manager smiled. So, congratulations? Ryan took a deep breath and quietly said, no. Silence. His manager blinked. You're turning down a promotion? Ryan nodded. I don't want more income. If the price is less control over my life. People thought he'd made the biggest mistake of his career. Some even laughed. One coworker whispered, you'll regret this for the rest of your life. For a moment, Ryan wondered if they were right. Then, 3 months later, the company announced layoffs. The entire department created by that promotion was eliminated. The people who thought Ryan had made a terrible decision were suddenly searching for jobs. Ryan wasn't celebrating. He was thinking about something else. The promotion had never been the test. The test was whether he could recognize that not every opportunity moves you toward freedom. Some opportunities simply pay you more to stay in the same cage. That night, Ryan crossed one sentence off his wall. Earn more, and replaced it with another. Need less control from money. For the first time, his life wasn't changing because he earned more. It was changing because he finally understood what wealth was actually buying. But one mystery remained. Ryan had discovered how people escaped the race. He still didn't know why almost everyone else willingly stayed in it. And the answer had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with the human brain. Ryan thought he finally understood money. He was wrong, because money had never been the real opponent. His own brain was. A week after turning down the promotion, Ryan met the stranger from the coffee shop again. This time, Ryan spoke first. I think I understand now. The stranger smiled. No, you understand the rules, but you still don't understand the player. Ryan looked confused. The player. The stranger pointed at Ryan. You. Then he asked one final question. Why do people buy things they don't even need? Ryan answered immediately. Because they want them. The stranger shook his head. No, they want to be seen. That sentence hit Ryan harder than anything he'd heard all year. Because suddenly, his entire life started replaying in his mind. The expensive shoes he barely wore. The upgraded phone that changed nothing. The apartment he couldn't comfortably afford. Just because it had a better address. None of those purchases had solved problems. They had solved insecurities. The stranger continued. Your brain has one job. Keep you accepted by the tribe. Thousands of years ago, being rejected meant death. So today, your brain still tries to signal, I belong. But now, the tribe isn't 50 people. It's 5 billion. And social media reminds you of that. Every single day, Ryan finally understood why comparison felt impossible to escape. The game wasn't happening in his bank account. It was happening inside his head. The people who quietly became wealthy weren't born with stronger discipline. They simply became aware of a game most people never realized they were playing. Ryan went home, walked into the bathroom, and looked at the mirror. Months earlier, a sticky note had said, I am falling behind. He smiled, took out another sticky note. This time, he wrote only one sentence. Whose race am I running? He stuck it to the mirror. Every morning, before spending $1, before saying yes, before chasing another goal, he asked himself that question. Sometimes, the answer surprised him. Years later, people started saying, Ryan got lucky. They saw the freedom. They never saw the questions. Because wealth isn't created the day your bank account becomes large. It's created the day you stop making decisions to impress people who were never thinking about you in the first place. So, why does it feel like everyone is getting rich except you? Maybe they aren't. Maybe you're only seeing the highlights. Maybe you're measuring wealth by things designed to be noticed. Or maybe you've been running a race you never consciously chose. The moment Ryan realized that, he stopped chasing the appearance of wealth. He started chasing ownership of his time, his attention, and his future. And ironically, that was the moment he finally started becoming wealthy. Because the people who truly win the money game aren't the ones who look richest. They're the ones who quietly become impossible to control. If this story changed the way you think about money, subscribe to Ryan Invests. Because the next story won't just change how you see wealth. It might change how you see your entire life. Click on this video right now.